This is the second video in a three-part video series about oral reading fluency. The first one was defining oral reading fluency. If you missed that video or would like to go back and review it, go to part one. This second video is going to be about assessing oral reading fluency. And then the third will give you some ideas about instructional strategies for teaching students to have increased oral reading fluency. This video was created by faculty in the Literacy Education program here at App State University. If you have questions about this video or the other fluency videos, please reach out to Dr. Morgan Blanton. So, part two is about assessing oral reading fluency. This is our definition that I introduced in the first part when we were defining oral reading fluency. It has three parts, and what I like about this definition is that it includes adjectives such as reasonably, appropriate, and suitable. That really helps us hone in on the purpose of fluency, as well as a nice reminder here at the end that the purpose of reading with reasonable accuracy and appropriate rate and a suitable expression is all so that we can have accurate and deep comprehension. And when we do those things, often we're more motivated to read. And so I really like this definition because of that. Here are three parts. We have already talked about accuracy in part one. So now we're going to focus in on automaticity. This is where this is the part that rate is included in. And then prosody will be another part that we will look at. And so assessing accuracy and automaticity, often these are assessed in one kind of measure. You may have heard the term curriculum-based measures, CBMs, they're often called. These are short timed assessments. These are used widely across the state of North Carolina as well as the country. They are standardized materials and procedures. So all students, for example, in second grade would be reading the same stories, and they would be given instructions with a standardized procedural script. These assessments assess accuracy and automaticity by determining how many words correct per minute were read. They are norm referenced, meaning that however many words correct per minute a student reads, it's compared to other students in a similar age group. They are often used for screening and progress monitoring. They're not necessarily the best choice for diagnostic or outcome measures, but we do use them widely to help us identify students who may need additional support and to monitor our progress when we're providing interventions. These measures do typically focus on singular skills. So you might have one that focuses in on, this one, for example, would focus on oral reading fluency, but you might have another measure that focuses in on comprehension or their phonemic awareness. So usually these curriculum-based measures are very targeted and specific. And we have all of these out there, and we know that they are valid and reliable measures, keeping in mind that these measures are not meant to be the sole data source that we have about a student. Valid, meaning they do measure these skills that we're talking about. Reliable, typically, we would say that that means that if it were given again, you would get similar results, or by someone else, you would get similar results. But we do want to make sure that these assessments are not the ones that are the only ones that are being used to make decisions about what students need. I have this picture over here just to kind of help us remember what accuracy and automaticity mean. So when we think about accuracy, it's the getting the words correct. And then the timer here is to remind us that that is looking at our rate. So how quickly do we get them correct? When we switch those two together, we have words correct per minute, which is what this acronym down here at the bottom means. So if we're going to assess accuracy, we are going to be looking at how a student reads and if they get them correct. And if they don't, how do we make notations about that, and what does it tell us? So first, what is considered an error? So when a student is reading a passage, we give them approximately 3 seconds to say the word. So if a student hesitates and they're trying to figure out the word and it takes them, a little bit, we don't want to wait more than 3 seconds to tell them the word. That's why here in this graphic, I have a T over it. That means the teacher had to tell it to them, because we want them to continue reading. We don't want them to get hung up on the word and try to decode it for too long, because then it will have an impact on their overall fluency numbers. And so we want to see how many words correct they can read in a minute. So that's why we want to standardize that process by telling them the word and letting them move on if they haven't told it to us in 3 seconds. Substitution is the next kind. So that's when a student misreads the word. Maybe the word is mom and they say mother, or the reverse. Or the word is there and they say three. That happens a lot. So if they did not read the word that was there, it is an error. And so here you see that if you're doing this paper pencil version, you might want to write the error word and then slash the word that they missed. So for example, if the word were there and the student said three, I would slash the word there and I would write the word three. So that is considered an error. And then this last kind is omission, and this could look a little different depending on what the student skips. Sometimes students skip a word. Maybe they're on a roll when they're reading and they just accidentally skip a word. So what I do is I would mark it and I put this little O down there just to remind myself that it was omitted. They skipped the word. Sometimes though, they get offline and they skip an entire line. Well, all of those have to be counted as errors. So I would mark through the whole line and put an O at the end to remind me that they omitted that whole entire line. Each one of those words counts as an error. If we were going to continue thinking about accuracy, though, there are some things that kids might do when they are reading that are not considered errors. So one thing is repeating a word or maybe multiple words. On this page, you have several examples. Maybe the student reads this and says one word. And so they've repeated the word one. The next line, maybe they repeat a couple of words. So here they would read it like a couple of words. So they would be repeating 2 words there. Sometimes they repeat a whole line. Again, they might get offline or they might just go back and reread because they're trying to make sure they're comprehending. Here, it would be something like a whole line of words, a whole line of words. So though that's not, it's going to take some of their time, it's not considered an error because they did read the words correctly. It's just they said them more than once. Typically, that comes into play later when, because they are saying these words more than once, they just don't get to as many words. And so it does affect their fluency in that way, but it's not necessarily going to affect their accuracy. It affects their words correct per minute because it does affect the rate. The next kind of situation that you might see when you're assessing students for oral reading fluency is an insertion. This happens often if kids get on a roll and they are reading and they just add a word in there. I still do this as well. I catch myself doing this. And so here you see that there is the 2 words there and they just added an extra word. So what I do just to remind myself, though it doesn't count as an error, I do want to see if this is a pattern, if they're adding extra words often, I want to know that. And so I would just put a little caret there, add the extra word and then circle it. So I'm remembering what it is that the student actually did. And then the last thing that you might see happening is self-correction. So this is when student makes a mistake and they fix it, and they do it within that 3 seconds. So you really don't have to tell them any words. They said the wrong one, and but they fix it really quickly, and so you just mark down that they had a self-correction and it's not considered an error. Now, if they were to go back and self-correct after the 3 seconds, then it would be still considered an error. But you might want to make a note that they self-corrected. Now let's look at calculating accuracy. We're going to get our math brains turned on here for this slide. And so here we're going to figure out the percent correct. So the way you do that is you put the number of words correctly read over the total number of words. And so if you think about this, I think about this as kind of like a test score. I got 95 out of 100 words. So that means I got 95% correct. My accuracy was 95%. And so you're really just figuring out, you're dividing to figure out the percent correct here. Now, what that tells us is thinking about their fluency levels. How difficult was this passage for students? And so when we think about what they can read on their own independently, we really do want them to have 95% or higher when it comes to their accuracy. We want the text to be easy enough for the student to read on their own with very few mistakes. Again, if we go back to our definition, we want them to be reasonably accurate. It doesn't mean that they have to have 100% to read a book on their own, but we want them to have, 95% accuracy so that they're sure to say the correct words, and that will help them understand what the text is actually saying and meaning. The next fluency level is instructional level. This is 90 to 94% accurate. This kind of text for a student would be challenging but manageable. They are making some mistakes. Often this is a level that we would use for our instruction. Because we're right there with them, we can help them with it. If they're making those mistakes, we can help them fix them. And then there's the last level here. This is the frustrational level. This is 89% or less. And so this type of text for a student, if they're missing about 10 or 11% of the text, they're going to be pretty frustrated, and it's really going to affect their comprehension. It's too difficult for them to read. They're making too many mistakes. And so we want to look at a text that is a little easier for them to practice and work our way up to that level. So thinking about accuracy, we've looked at accuracy, and now we're going to think about automaticity. Calculating automaticity. This is where you think about those errors. So the total number of words a student read, you're going to take away the number of errors. And then that's going to tell you how many words correct the student read in 1 minute. Now, one thing I have not mentioned is that you are timing this for a minute. So your total number of words read is likely not going to be the whole passage. It could be, but it might not be the whole passage. So you'll have to calculate how many words they read in that minute, and then take away the errors, and then that will tell you their rate, their words correct per minute score. That is what you use to compare, because we know that these types of measures are norm referenced. So we compare it to other students at the same age or grade as the one you are assessing. So if we're thinking about the norms, or that norm referencing that I was talking about, there are some national norms that you can use to just get an idea of where the student that you are assessing stands in relation to other students their age. And so here I've pulled from Hasbrook and Tyndall's 2017 fluency data. And this is just the second grade section of that table. And what it tells us is that a student who is considered their oral reading fluency is at the 90th percentile, which means they are reading with accuracy and automaticity better than about 90% of second graders. Then in the fall, they're reading about 111 words correct per minute. In the winter, 131, and then in the spring, 148. The average second grader here at the 50th percentile in the fall is reading about 50 words correct per minute. In the winter, 84, and then in the spring, 100. And then if you look down at the 10th percentile here, this is saying that about 90% of second graders have a more accurate and more automatic reading rate than these students. And so these students are reading approximately 23 words correct per minute in the fall, in the winter 35, and then in the spring 43. This just gives you a good idea just for comparison to see where does this student that I'm assessing fall in these norms. How do they compare to other second graders? These are used for screening purposes, and then they're also used for goal setting for progress monitoring. So we've talked about accuracy, we've talked about automaticity. Now let's talk about how we assess prosody, because this is the one that we don't often talk about enough, especially when it comes to curriculum-based measures. This one requires a rubric. This is not one that's necessarily a mathematical calculation. In accuracy and automaticity, it's very clear cut. With prosody, you want to use a rubric and your own teacher judgment. So this rubric in particular is one that looks at expression and volume, phrasing, the smoothness of their reading, and then the pace. And it has descriptors 1 through 4 that you would then rate a student's prosody. How did it sound when they were reading? How did their expression and volume sound? If we think back to our definition, was it suitable expression, suitable volume? Was the phrasing suitable and help them in an effort to help them understand what they are reading? Was it suitably smooth, or were they hesitating all of the time and having lots of rough spots? And then the pace, was it this, and you think about this one as it relates to rate. And so is it at an appropriate rate or not? So not too fast, not too slow, the Goldilocks rule. So putting it all together, we want to think about oral reading fluency in a full way. So not just their accuracy and automaticity, which is shown here on the left with the words correct per minute, but also prosody, because it is an indicator of comprehension. And so we want to put these two assessments together to really understand how a student is doing oral reading fluency wise.